Revolutions Per Minute is a weekly radio show from the New York City chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, recorded live at WBAI 99.5 in Brooklyn every Tuesday at 5. RPM is about doing the work to build a democratic socialist future. Every week, hear the latest news, analysis, and organizing experience from the minds and hearts of activists fighting every day in NYC. Join the movement at socialists.nyc.
Yo, it's good, New York. You're listening to Revolutions Per Minute on Underground WBAI. We're a socialist radio show and podcast for members of the New York City chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. The DSA is the largest socialist organization in the United States, with 56,000 members nationwide, and NYC-DSA is its biggest chapter. We are run by our 5,500 plus members and organizers who are working together to build a democratic socialism in all 5 boroughs. Bernie is back, and he's better than ever. This weekend, 26,000 supporters of his campaign gathered in Queensbridge Park to celebrate Alexandria Ocasio Cortez's endorsement and together prepared to fight to elect a democratic socialist in the belly of the imperialist beast. It was the largest rally of any presidential candidate this year and demonstrates that the energy is with his campaign. Today, we're joined by Charlie Baker to discuss NYC-DSA's effort to not only elect Bernie Sanders, but to build a working-class organization for the long-term struggle against capitalism. Then we have a live report from the rally by special correspondent Amy Wilson. But first, the headlines, and we're doing it live today. And I just, instead of going through The Thorn, which is a great weekly newsletter that you should check out, and you can get great updates on electoral and other news items here in New York City, I just wanted to give a shout out to all the working class fighters all across the world right now in places like Lebanon, Barcelona, and Ecuador, Chile, and Haiti, who are organizing, taking the streets, and fighting back against austerity and state repression. All on the mainstream corporate media, you'll hear all about how everything is terrible in Venezuela and they have it's authoritarian there. But for some reason, when the state forces, the police, the military are firing on protesters in neoliberal capitalist governments like Chile and Haiti, governments that are backed by the United States, you don't really see any of that on the news. It seems to just kind of fade into the background. So, we want to highlight that what we're doing here at RPM and the mission of a place like WBAI, which we all need to fight to get back on the air, is to share these stories to working class people all across New York who need to hear about the real struggles that are happening against the international ruling class. So I just want to shout out those struggles that are happening. Ecuador, they were able to push back the austerity measures. And, Chile, right now, there are tanks on the street that are trying to put down a general strike that has been called. So just absolute solidarity with every working class person all around the world who's engaged and struggle. All right. Well, now Lee is also joining us today. I didn't shout her out in the headlines, but not in the introduction, not the headlines. But Lee is with us all the time, so I'll let her make her own introduction. And then I also screwed up Charlie's last name in the intro. It's Baker, and Charlie was a really key member of getting RPM off the ground. So I always want to shout him out for that.
It's good to be back.
We're happy to have you. So what we normally ask our guests here is what got them involved in the movement for socialism? What forces pushed you into the struggle? Why did you join DSA specifically? And what sort of organizing, other than, helping RPM get off the ground, have you been involved in?
Sure. So I kind of got involved in DSA in more of a slow rolling fashion. I started going to meetings in February of 2018 because I guess I'd heard about it and I wanted to check it out. I'd always been kind of a lefty Bernie Sanders supporter in 2016, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't really involve myself in any of the work that people were doing at that point. I was, basically just what we call a paper member, except I wasn't actually even an official dues-paying member yet. I was just going to meetings, listening, then going home and waiting for the next meeting.
On Twitter, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. Definitely on Twitter, listening to podcasts and stuff. So, like many new people in DSA, I wasn't even really aware that all this stuff was going on behind the scenes, that, there were all these working groups that people in the organization put immense amounts of their passion and time and energy into. I was basically like, I'm going to branch meetings every month. I'm going to like reading groups. That's it, right? Like that's all there is for me to do. And then that all changed a few months later. At the end of May 2018, I got this email blast saying, hey, DSA just endorsed this candidate for state senate in Brooklyn. Her name is Julia Salazar. Come by our new campaign office if you want to help out. So I show up on the first day, the office is open, and I can trace everything back to that point. That's really like when my involvement in DSA actually began. I started volunteering in the campaign office on a regular basis that summer. Because of that, I met dozens of amazing DSA people. They're walking in every day, committed to electing the first socialist in the state senate in 100 years. And many of those people I now count among my close friends. So the Salazar campaign, that's like my first real entree into DSA proper. And after that, I joined the organizing committee of Lower Manhattan DSA's electoral working group. And that's been like my main DSA project I've been working on in 2019, after briefly, being involved in the launch of RPM, which is awesome, still going underground.
Helping out with our social media stuff, if I'm correct, right?
That is correct. And more recently, also in the past couple months, I became one of the co-chairs of the Lower Manhattan branch of DSA as well. So in other words, like I went from having not the faintest clue of like what to involve myself in within DSA, going to meetings, but feeling kind of like on the outside, knowing nobody in the room. And to now, like I've taken on 2 organizing committee positions, and like if I stop to think about it, I'm doing work for DSA every single day, which is probably true of every OC member across the city. Like every organizing committee member is doing actual work, for DSA every day. People new to the organization, they might not realize that like leadership positions in DSA, that it's not figureheads. It isn't this big like prestigious thing. They're really actual hands-on administrative roles. So like when I say I'm the secretary of the electoral working group, it's not like in the Soviet sense. I'm like literally the secretary. Like I'm sending emails, I'm like making Action Network events, doing data entry, like spending a lot of time on Slack, going to meetings.
I don't know, I hear Stalin was on Slack all the
time. He was around today. He'd want to use Signal probably.
Especially when robbing those banks.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I just want to give a shout out to like every organizing committee member of every working group and branch across the city, because people are doing this in addition to their day jobs, and this is a volunteer task that people do on their free time while we juggle all of our responsibilities and lives outside of DSA. Yeah, so I don't know. It's kind of a long story, but what I'm trying to get across with it is that like I really strongly believe that electoral work is one of the best ways to take new paper members of DSA who are maybe kind of spinning their wheels, not really sure what to do, and get them plugged in, give them something concrete to do, and they'll meet so many people in that campaign that the next time they walk into a meeting, they don't feel all alone. They literally know half the people in the room, and they fought together working towards something meaningful. Because once you really get involved, DSA is this really special group to be a part of. I feel very lucky to have found it, be fighting alongside y'all. Yeah, that's basically my story.
Well, we're happy to have you fighting alongside all of us. And I think you are highlighting something that I hear from a lot of people. I think like in particular, like Salazar's campaign was because it was so like the organizing staff, the campaign was really dominated by DSA. It was a DSA campaign. So it empowered people in a way that they hadn't felt in a lot of, if they'd ever got involved in political organizing before, maybe they had just been kind of like given one thing to do and not being like put in a position where it's like, no, you have these responsibilities and you're part of this campaign, that we're a team, we're organizing together to build power, and like put someone like Salazar, who's not even just a self-declared socialist, but she's like not afraid to say it's like she's a Marxist. Like she is one of the most, if not the most radical people elected in government, and I say radical as a good thing, in our lifetime. So especially on that high level. So it definitely, the Salazar campaign really, I feel like, pulled a lot of great people in who are now doing work in electoral and other realms of the organization too.
It's a great springboard for a lot of people to just like get their feet wet and then take that training and, use it someplace else afterward.
Yeah, it's like an organizing development like process. Like, and but also you're winning things too.
Exactly.
So it's not like you're just spinning your wheels.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, because she's in office, we can directly trace that to the fact that we won, very strong rent regulations and tenant protections in, the state Senate and state assembly this session. Like, those would not be in place right now if we hadn't won that,
Oh, absolutely. I think Salazar has been absolutely critical in pushing policy to the left in Albany, and shameless promotion, but we had her on a few months ago, and if you want to check that out, it's wherever you're streaming podcast apps. So now let's transition into what's going on in this moment. We've already mentioned it, but Bernie had this incredible rally this weekend, the largest of the cycle, and some numbers push it up because if you include all the people in the streets, larger than any rally that was done in 2016 too, with either Sanders or Trump, that the energy is there. And so maybe you've kind of already hit on your answers to this, but why did you get involved with DSA's Bernie 2020 campaign? And like, why do you think it's such a critical campaign for building working class power? And Lee, feel free to jump in at any time you want.
You can start. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I'll talk later.
Sounds good. So DSA was one of the first organizations to endorse Bernie pretty soon after he announced. And it was kind of a no-brainer. I mean, like, being real, like, he's the only candidate who gives hope to working people, not as some, beneficent act of charity, but as radical empowerment, which is a really big difference, I think. Every other candidate is saying, look, you have problems, you can't pay your medical bills, you can't make rent, but, I'm a smart person, and I'm going to save you. I mean, it's laughable. It's this technocratic language that's so immensely condescending, looking down on working people and saying, I am going to reach down and help you. And so Bernie turns that on its head. He says, I know you have problems. You can't make rent. You can't pay your medical bills. I faced those same problems growing up, in a rent-stabilized apartment in New York City. I'm going to empower you so that together we can take on the people who are oppressing you. And that's another key difference here is, he says there are people who are actively oppressing you, and we're going to stop them together. So when other candidates say, I'm going to save you from what? Save you from whom? They don't say. It's they can maybe identify this effect of oppression, right?
Corruption sometimes.
Yeah, right, corruption.
Well, I mean, Bernie says that too sometimes, but he also
Sure.
identifies the enemy.
Sure. Yeah, it's don't get me started on the Washington Square speech, the Triangle Shirtwaist speech. I was like, that's the wrong take, man. But even when politicians are identifying, okay, it seems like people in this country feel oppressed, right? Whenever they try to speak to it, it usually feels disingenuous because these candidates, they largely come from elite circles. They can't relate whatsoever to working people. And as for the cause, it's totally nebulous because, for them, who can say why you're oppressed? I'm going to save you, but, it's not realistic to give you everything you want. Here's a tax-deferred medical savings account. Here's some crumbs. Now just, sit down and shut up. Bernie is the only candidate who identifies the enemies of working people in this country, who identifies the forces who have actively chosen to put working people in the dire straits that they're in. And he says, we're going to defeat them. And the only way we can do that is together. So that's why I think this is such a critical campaign for building working class power, because he's actually using language of empowerment and telling people, I can't do this alone. We need everybody together.
It's centered on building a movement.
Right.
And it's not just about electing a president. It's about how do we build power, not just for this one campaign, but for the struggle that's to come. Like it's
right.
It's not like we can't just like erase Trump and like everything's okay. It's that we have real problems in the society, and that we can't just do it through the ballot box, that people have to organize, build power in their workplaces, in their homes, in the streets, and unite together for a long-term challenge to the ruling class, and eventually they're overthrowing them. So what kind of work is DSA doing for Bernie 2020? And like, what has your experience been like canvassing or tabling? Like, what are people saying? Like, what matters most to them?
Sure. So DSA is running what's called an independent expenditure, or IE, campaign for Bernie, which is just this, kind of fancy legalese way of saying that we're running our own campaign separate from Bernie's campaign. It means we're not legally allowed to coordinate with the Bernie campaign. So if you're anything above a rank and file volunteer of one campaign, if you're in a decision-making role, in other words, you can't be in a decision-making role in the other campaign, right? So there's some limitations. We can't talk to each other, but this structure is actually a really great opportunity for DSA because it allows us to operate completely independently from Bernie 2020. It allows us to message things however we want and not take orders from Bernie's campaign. So like a prime example of this is Saturday. We canvassed outside the Bernie rally in Queens. We had 50 DSA volunteers going out with clipboards, with flyers that advertised our DSA for Bernie campaign right alongside the 4 Brooklyn candidates that New York City DSA just endorsed for state senate and state assembly. And on the other side of the flyer was this list of every DSA event in the city in the next few weeks. So we absolutely would not have been able to do that if we were part of the official Bernie 2020 campaign. We would have literally just been handing out Bernie lit, not DSA literature. And when Bernie says, like, not me, us, we need a movement, to be clear, DSA is that movement. We need to build something that outlasts any one campaign, like you were just saying. We need to really build power, and that's exactly what we're doing. This rally on Saturday, that was the ultimate recruiting event for DSA. 26,000 people there supporting a candidate who explicitly identifies as a democratic socialist. And who are we? We're the Democratic Socialists of America. That's like the easiest canvassing opportunity in the world, we literally
bring them all together.
Yeah, we got like 400 signups of people who wanted to join our DSA for Bernie campaign on that one day. We sold like almost $1,000 of buttons, union printed merchandise that's going to be used to fund our future canvasses, buy clipboards, buy tables and stuff, so that we can keep expanding our operation. We got dozens of voter registrations as well. This was a day that was special for a lot of reasons. I don't think anybody is going to forget that day anytime soon, the speeches we heard, AOC, Tiffany Caban. But in another way, it was such a special day because we grew our operation tenfold. All these people who were at that rally are now going to be at our future events because they signed up, and they're going to be making us stronger.
That is incredible to hear, and exactly the sort of work that I feel like DSA needs to be doing with this campaign if it wants to be building power in the long term, is to connect people with the movement and organizing and building sort of working class institutions that can actually challenge capital and empire. And I know you have to jump off.
No,
soon.
I can stay for a bit. It's all good now.
But I guess if you want to stay any longer,
sure.
Feel free to. We were going to go to a clip that we have from the rally. We had put it together, a 10-minute thing. But before we do that, I just wanted to, for people who weren't at the rally but are listening to this, how can they get involved with the campaign?
Totally. Yeah, so the main thing we're doing right now in terms of canvassing is focusing on voter registration efforts. Some branches have started persuasion, which means door knocking, going door to door and talking to people about why they should support Bernie. But mainly what we're doing right now is voter registration because in New York we have closed primaries. So you can only vote for Bernie in the primary if you're a registered Democrat. And the deadline to change your party registration, in case you're listening, is Valentine's Day, February 14th. Very convenient to remember. We love Bernie. We love registering as Democrats. I guess. There's a nice way to remember.
Only for that purpose.
Right, exactly. Right. So we're registering people to vote as Democrats, but we're particularly targeting areas with high levels of support for Bernie. So, for example, in my home branch of Lower Manhattan, I don't know if you saw that New York Times donor map that came out a few months ago. Basically, it was like a breakdown by zip code of which zip codes, heavily favor which candidates in terms of individual donations to that campaign, right? And that's really better than any poll as a metric of determining candidates' level of support in that area. So if you look at Manhattan, right, kind of a sad picture. We've got a lot of Warren support. We've got a lot of Buttigieg support.
Unsurprisingly.
Unsurprisingly, right? Actually, outside of Manhattan, the rest of New York City, Bernie's number one in every single zip code, or almost every single zip code in the rest of the boroughs.
I think Brooklyn Heights was an exception.
Right. Yeah, it's a very positive picture outside of Manhattan. When you look at Manhattan, the only glimmer of hope, shall we say, is the Lower East Side, a solidly working class neighborhood with a lot of public housing developments, right? So that's where, when Lower Manhattan DSA, when we go out and do Bernie voter registration, Bernie canvases, we're targeting the Lower East Side. We're setting up outside, usually this grocery store that services several different NYCHA complexes in a couple block radius. And so the working people of that neighborhood, they come to this grocery store every weekend to get their food. And guess who's outside to greet them when they're there? That's us. So it's like pretty much the ideal opportunity to talk to people about Bernie. And it's been really successful in terms of like a lot of people had no idea that they need to be registered as a Democrat to vote for him. That was a big problem in 2016. Is that a lot of his supporters were unable to vote for him. And I just wanted to say that, there's a lot of like doom and gloom. I mean, up until Saturday's rally, let's say, up the AOC endorsement, there's been a lot of doom and gloom. If you go on Twitter, right, Rose emoji Twitter is always freaking out about, oh my God, it's so sad. It doesn't seem like we're doing very well, Bernie campaign, blah, blah, blah. If you actually go out there and talk to real people, you will have so much hope, and you will be like almost 100% convinced that we will win this thing. It's pretty remarkable. There was a statistic that came out about a year ago that said, Bernie's the most popular politician currently in America, right? If you're just online, you're not going to believe that. Right?
Or if you're just paying attention to cable news and the New York Times and Politico,
right?
You'll have your perception gets a little twisted.
There's a well-documented corporate media blackout of his campaign, and when they do talk about him, it's almost universally negative, right? So if you just watch that stuff, you're going to be thinking, oh, we're going to lose. I'm not going to get involved. It'll just be a waste of my time. If you do get involved, you will see almost immediately that everybody loves him. I mean, you go talk to working class people, and for example, for me, the Lower East Side, it is the rare person who doesn't support Bernie. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. I would just say, if you're in a bad mood, feeling bad about our chances, come out and canvass, because you'll end it being in a good mood and thinking that we're going to win. So if you want to do that, we have a handy dandy link. And so this will show you a map of every upcoming DSA for Bernie event across the city, so you can find the one nearest to you and one that works for your schedule. We have events in every borough over the next month. It's going to be really cool. The link is bit.ly/NYC-DSA4, that's the number 4, Bernie. So bit.ly/NYC-DSA for Bernie. And once again, that'll be where you can get plugged into any DSA for Bernie canvas across the city.
Incredible. Well, thank you for coming on.
You're so welcome. Glad to be here, man. Glad to be back.
We're very happy to have you back, and hopefully we can get some more updates from you on the campaign.
That would be awesome.
Things progress.
Hopefully WBAI can come out from the underground, man.
Yeah, I think I have a feeling that next time you're on, it will be live. That's my hope.
Here's hoping.
That's I mean, gotta have hope in the struggle, right? So we're gonna jump to the clip that we have live from the rally. Amy Wilson was there. She was talking to Bernie supporters, and there's a lot of good energy, good vibes. So let's check that out.
Hey, what's up, New York City? This is Amy Wilson reporting live from Queensbridge Park on Saturday, October 19th. We're here for the Bernie's Back rally, along with 20,000 plus of our closest friends and Bernie supporters, to celebrate Bernie Sanders' return to good health and his endorsement by, among many other of New York City's progressive politicians, our very own Representative Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. Let's hear from the crowd at the Bernie's Back rally. All right, do you mind if I record you?
That's totally fine.
And what's your name?
Megan.
Megan, hi, I'm Amy.
Hi, Amy. Nice
How you doing? Yeah, nice to meet you too. Beautiful day.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Perfect.
What brought you out today?
I've been supporting Bernie since 2015. It's a movement. It's a revolution, and we're all in it together.
Absolutely, I agree. What of Bernie's policies do you think is most important?
They all fit together is the issue. I think the Green New Deal is essential. We have to treat the climate crisis like it's our World War III, and that means we have to throw everything at it. We need to be able to build a 21st century infrastructure and economy and be able to lift not just ourselves, but support the rest of the world in coming out of this crisis. So it's a global effort, and Bernie has the strongest plan by far in order to do this. And yes, it's a little idealistic, but at this point, we've got to try.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing wrong with idealistic, right?
Yeah. And also Medicare for all, along with canceling the medical debt that so many people are suffering from and not able to lift themselves out of. People are sick and dying and rationing their medication, and we can do so much better. There is so much wealth in this country. We can support everybody having their health and their dignity.
Absolutely. Do you live in New York City?
I do. I live in Brooklyn.
Oh, cool. Yeah, me too. It's a beautiful day. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling like socialism's going to win.
I'm feeling it. Yeah, again, the movement is not a buzzword. It's active. It's about people putting in whatever they can, whether it's making phone calls, talking to their neighbors, registering their friends to vote. The fact is that something like 50% of people don't even vote in the general election, and that gets worse for the primary and worse for midterms.
Forget about local elections, right?
And we just have to get some of that 50% of people who don't even vote in the general out to the primaries, and it is possible, and we can win. There's a path.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, very well said. Thanks so much for speaking with me.
Of course, thank you so much.
All right. Hello, do you mind if I record you?
Absolutely.
And what's your name?
Julian.
Julian? Hi, I'm Amy.
Hi, good to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And what's your name?
Daniel.
Daniel, I'm Amy. Nice to meet you. What's your name? Lily, thanks so much for coming out today, guys. And what brought you here?
Well, I'm a Bernie-crat. I'm worried about the country. I'm worried about the direction we're going. I see that we have a corrupt president just trashing all the laws and the environment. I got them to worry about it. And it's very scary that, the way we're leaving the country for them is, very scary.
Absolutely, yeah. And I noticed your hat. I see you're a union member, right?
I'm an absolute local 3, IBW.
Cool, nice. And you're a WBAI listener?
Absolutely, I contribute also.
What's your favorite show on WBAI?
Democracy Now.
Well, they're a good one. They're a good one.
Yep.
My first name is Amy, just like her, so
Okay.
I'm trying to follow in her footsteps. Our show is Revolutions Per Minute, Tuesdays at 5, and you'd heard about the WBAI shutdown, right?
Yeah. You got me listening to NPR now.
I know, it's a real shame, isn't it? Yeah, so we're fighting for it. We're trying to bring the station back. We actually have a court date next week.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Great.
So today is a beautiful day here in Queensbridge Park, and I don't know about you guys, but today I feel like socialism is going to win.
I hope so. I hope people understand what it means. Because everyone's like socialism, and they're like, "What do you mean socialism?" That's China, you got to get educated.
What's your definition of what socialism means?
Socialism is a movement by the people, for the people. The major institutions, water, health, run by the people.
Okay, do you mind if I record you?
Yeah. I don't mind. No, not minding. Yes, it's okay.
Okay, all right. And what are your names?
Fanon Lako.
And Rachel Himes.
Hey guys, I'm Amy, and we're out here at the Bernie's Back rally on October 19th. Bernie's back, baby.
Bernie's back.
How you feeling?
So good, so good. I'm at this rally, but also I've been doing a lot of canvassing in my neighborhood, day-to-day, weeknight evenings at the subway station, and so many people I talk to are super excited about Bernie. My next-door neighbor's a Bernie supporter. People, I don't even say anything to them, and they say, yes, Bernie. So I'm feeling so good. I really believe that we can win.
I've heard that from people who've been canvassing all over the city. They're like, people hardly even need me to canvass that.
Yeah, they were already there.
And where do you live? Where are you doing this?
I live in Flatbush. Sort of right underneath Prospect Park.
Cool. How you feeling today?
I'm so excited. Ocasio just endorsed. It's absolutely incredible. I think it's also a really great thing for the movement because, a lot of people love Ocasio for her politics, but also for the fact that she's a person with politics who's also a woman of color, someone who looks like me. I think that that's like really beautiful to see, and it's, I think, going to bring a lot of people who might have skepticism about the fact that Bernie is a white man, I think hopefully more confidently into the fold, and very, very important because that makes them more receptive to the basic message of democratic socialist politics, that if we come together, we're able to create powerful, transformative change in our communities.
Absolutely, and I think that, we're seeing this sort of reaction this week to the AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib endorsements is like, ooh, identity politics, but they're women of color, like, ooh.
Yeah.
And, like, not being a woman of color myself, but being a woman, it's like the policies are where it's at. The policies are where we can make change.
We're seeing a lot of, like, liberals, white liberals, surprised that these women of color, like, won't fall in line with the Democratic Party. Like, honestly, genuine shock that they won't do that. I'm so happy that they're not. It's so meaningful.
And this is one of the amazing things about the Bernie campaign, and also the contrast between Bernie and Warren, is that for all of the difficulties that it creates for the campaign, for one thing that's good for us as democratic socialists is that it draws a clear line. We're not for just electing someone who says they're going to come up with the best plan, that the problem with America is that we haven't had good plans. The problem with America is the ruling class. The problem with America is the fact that people who have interests directly in contrast to ours have the ability to control and shape what our society looks like, and that's unacceptable. To the extent that we can change that, it's going to require organizing and building a fighting movement by and for the working class. And that's something that Bernie is so clearly unequivocal about, and I think it's the thing that's really sharpened and highlighted by the contrast between those two candidates.
Well, today I'm feeling like socialism's going to win. How about you, Tim?
Absolutely. I mean, so many people are on board with socialism and talk to them in our communities, and I think for them, socialism means something like pretty simple, like not that complicated. It means like being able to live your life in a safe way, a healthy way, having a home that isn't crumbling, having landlords who aren't actively trying to evict you, knowing that if you get sick, you will be able to get well with the adequate care and not go bankrupt. That's what socialism means to people who I talk to about it many times a week, like in my neighborhood, in and around Brooklyn. It's what people want.
What was your question?
Is socialism going to win?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, because we have an incredible candidate that's inspired millions of people across the country, but also yes, because that candidate has inspired people to organize. I think DSA, like seeing the growth that we're having during the campaign, seeing our capacity to organize, to win, to elect people like Ocasio, people like Julia Salazar, people like hopefully our 4 new candidates for Assembly and Senate and state, people like, being able to push Hakeem Jeffries to become a co-sponsor of Medicare for All. Like, these are all signs that the theory of change that we stand behind is going to win. And the more that we build, the more that we win, the more successful this campaign is, the more true that's going to be. So win or lose with Bernie Sanders, socialism is going for the long run.
Yeah. And I think the important thing there is, I think hopefully what we can communicate to people with the movement in DSA, with the movement with socialism in general, is that this is an involvement that extends beyond electoral politics. We're meeting people where they're at. People think politics is voting. People are out here at this rally because they're interested in a presidential candidate. But hopefully what we can do in building this movement, let people know that politics extends beyond voting at the ballot box. It can become a part of your daily life. That's what the movement is.
Absolutely. Well said. Thanks so much for both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
And there you have it, folks. That's straight from the mouths of our comrades in attendance at the Bernie's Back rally. Socialism will win, and it will win because we're working to do so. This has been Amy Wilson for Revolutions Per Minute. Now back to the studio to hear more about DSA's campaigns.
Thanks, Amy, for that really great special report that we have from the rally on Saturday. I was there, and it was really an incredible scene, and I feel very, very encouraged after that day. So now Lee is taking center stage as we talk about the location of the rally, why it was so important for it to be at Queensbridge Park, what that symbolizes, and what Bernie was trying to point out in terms of environmental racism.
Yeah, so I mean, in addition to being in Long Island City, which was this, spot of an incredible victory against capitalism, as, we kept out Amazon. If you look at, the images of the rally, you see the massive crowd, and then you see these massive smokestacks in the background, and that is Ravenswood Power Plant. It is a massive power plant that provides about 20% of New York City's power, and it's not always running at full capacity. Sometimes it's a peaker plant, which means on the days that we need to use the most energy, it's running. But it is the dirtiest power plant in New York State. It burns number 6 oil, which is one of the dirtiest fuels as far as particulate matter that comes out. It's a pollutant that comes when you burn oil, and it also burns frack gas. So this is a very dirty fossil fuel plant, and it is also very close to the Queensbridge housing, which is the country's largest public housing. So for Bernie to choose this location, it was kind of to bring together these two really important issues, which for decades, a lot of times people have been organizing in silos. The people working on housing necessarily haven't been working with the environmental movement, especially for a long time. The environmental movement has been dominated by, white people trying to save the polar bears. And what, Bernie was able to bring out and show is that environmental racism and environmental justice have to be key components of any plan moving forward. You can't have a Green New Deal and not address the fact that New York's dirtiest power plants are almost always in low-income communities. They're almost always in Black and brown communities. The other peaker plants that are run by frack gas in New York City are almost all in low-income communities of color like Sunset Park. So for a very long time, Astoria has kind of been dumped on. In addition to the Ravenswood power plant, there's the Astoria generating station, which is where that explosion was last year. And so this area has been polluted for a very long time by these massive power plants, and in addition to the highways that go through this area. So it was, nicknamed Asthma Alley because people are breathing in these pollutants. And what is it doing? Oh, it's so that, we can power Manhattan and the financial district and the rich people who live on, the Upper East Side and Upper West Side. Like, there's no power plants there. Where we see them is places like Con Ed's power plant is in the Lower East Side, like we just heard before, some of the still working class communities in Manhattan. So it was like a very important place to be. And Bernie made that a very center point of his speech that, these issues are related and we can't move forward without addressing them. Just a little bit of history about Ravenswood. It was originally owned by Con Edison. Then they had to sell it. And it switched hands a lot over the last couple of years because it's had a lot of financial problems. At one point, it was owned by TransCanada, which is the company that wants to build the Keystone XL pipeline. So, it's had owners like Con Ed and TransCanada, people who actually don't care about the communities, where their infrastructure is located. All they care about is making their profit, and they don't care that people in Queensbridge housing, have been poisoned by this plant for decades.
Yeah, it was so powerful to hear him really call that out, and something that I'd been hoping to hear from Bernie, how when you're talking about the capitalism and the way that it impacts people and how it is so much easier to demonize and kind of take resources away and pollute communities that are racialized and demonized by dominant ideologies, by the media. And when these people are said, those people don't really matter. Capitalism relies on having populations that are considered lower and basically inhuman. So for him to center anti-racism and environmental justice, bringing those together was really incredible. And it's absolutely necessary for the socialist movement to build. And so can you just tell our listeners a little bit about what eco-socialists were doing at the rally and how it relates to the public power campaign?
Yeah, so right before the rally, actually, New York City-DSA Eco-Socialist Working Group was having a training with some other allies that have been organizing around things like a Green New Deal, New York City Communities for Change, the Sunrise Movement, Food and Water Watch, to launch a new campaign called the Green New Deal Uprising. And the first demand of that campaign is for public power. And And that's something, too, that really separates a lot of the presidential candidates. I mean, we're seeing, plans for climate change that are way better than what we saw in 2016. And a lot of people actually recognizing that this is, a huge crisis. But there are some differences in people's plans. You have someone who's very centrist like Joe Biden, who will not come out against fracking. And then you have, Senator Elizabeth Warren saying we can ban fracking, and Bernie Sanders. But then where the difference is Bernie Sanders is calling for public power and ownership of our utilities. And that's a really important part as we make this transition. So at Ravenswood, where the backdrop of this rally was, they've now approved to have massive battery storage, which is seems like a good thing. Okay, we're going to start ramping down the fossil fuel use there. We're going to use this site for something good. But just replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy doesn't address, the environmental harm and the environmental justice that has been happening for decades. A real Green New Deal has to center those things. And when we have public power, we can actually do that in a much more significant way. Currently with Con Edison, with National Grid, millions and millions of our ratepayer dollars are just going to pay off their shareholders. The current model is that if they invest more in fossil fuel infrastructure, then they can just get more money on their return. So New York City DSA Eco-Socialist Working Group has been working now to launch a campaign for public power so that we can take that power back from our utility, literally take our power and our power back. These things are very, very linked. And so, I think just having this location, really centering a Green New Deal as part of his campaign, I think that's a big part too of having AOC there. And, because, she's really put the Green New Deal on the map in a way that a lot of people have been struggling to do for a very long time. So it's very important that this rally happened there. And I think it highlights the struggle that we're going to be having here in New York City. Are we going to continue to invest tons and tons of money on fossil fuel infrastructure? And, how do we actually get off of fossil fuels in a way that makes sure that the communities that have been the most harmed are reaping the benefits of that and owning their own power? How do we have solar on NYCHA? That we are no longer beholden to corporate utilities, to fossil fuel companies. And that's what, right now we're working towards here in New York City. It's been a campaign that is now endorsed by all of New York City DSA. And I think it's really exciting too to kind of make sure that it's an issue that's intersecting with housing, because they are so related. Buildings like NYCHA buildings and a lot of low-income communities, their housing is not actually safe for them. It leaks energy. It's there's mold, things like that. These things are very, very linked. And I think the more we link, the environmental movement with the housing movement, it's really going to be an unstoppable force. And I'm sure it's something that really scares, both the real estate industry and, big corporate utilities like Con Ed and National Grid.
Anything that scares those two reactionary evil forces sounds like a good thing to me. And I just want to end on the note, and I think what you're really highlighting here is that by having the rally there, it's also this is the social base that we're going to use to transform our society. The people who are most impacted by the horrors of capitalism need to be at the center of leading it and empowering them, not just regulating things so that we can ask the people who are polluting our planet and, making people suffer so they can profit, asking them to behave better. No, we need to take the power for ourselves. And so thank you for ending the episode on that really important note. And I want to thank Charlie for joining us. And I want to thank our listeners for tuning every week. Hopefully next week we'll be back live. The struggle for WBAI continues. The struggle for Bernie Sanders to get elected continues. And the big struggle for socialism is on the move. That's it for RPM this week. Hope you'll tune in next week.